Power's a strange currency. It doesn't need a gun when it already owns your secrets. On this lonely sliver of Caribbean rock, a disgraced math teacher built a pleasure palace, then wired it like a CIA safe house, every chandelier hiding a lens.
The FBI drilled Epstein's safe after he was arrested, and they took out anywhere from hundreds to thousands of DVDs.
They are videos that exist.
I was trafficked to other billionaires, politicians, professors, even royalty.
2 decades later, he's dead. The tapes are missing, and the internet is stuck on all the wrong things.
I've tried not to focus on whether or not Epstein killed himself. I think that's kind of a red herring.
Today, we ask a different question. Who built Jeffrey Epstein? And why was he worth protecting at all costs?
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
My friends, the question about Epstein, it hasn't been answered. I did a video, just a little while back when all of this broke from the Department of Justice that the case is basically closed. I don't agree with it. I gave you my thoughts. Based upon that, it really caused me to do a deep dive into Epstein. There's a lot of unanswered questions. So to answer President Trump's dilemma, this isn't us fixating on this creep. It's about exposing the system that built him. You'll hear about cameras and jail cells, about his private jets and where he died, but those are really just stage props in a trial we haven't even started. The only question that really matters is who gave Epstein his power and why did they protect him? Over the next 25 minutes, we'll examine survivor testimonies, flight logs, bank warnings, sworn depositions, and even more. You'll hear experts, podcasters, even comedians riff on conspiracy, but none of it stands without some shred of evidence. So listen closely. If we stop at how, we'll never get to who. Until we demand, all of those answers. Whoever engineered Epstein's rise and built the walls around him, they'll keep the next one safely out of reach. And let me tell you, this is not a pity tour through Epstein's, childhood or a rehash of every tabloid rumor. We're beyond that. We're skipping the sob story. We're zeroing in on the part no one can explain. How an underqualified math teacher, that's what he was, vaulted into the inner circles of billionaires, spies, and ultimately blackmail. When the dots stop adding up, we'll look at really who's drawing them. And that's the question.
At the end of months of digging, meeting the pharmacists, there was still this question mark. Who is this guy?
He was a mysterious currency trading financier with crazy rules so that no one would ever invest with him.
There's a guy, he's getting together with people and compromising
blackmailing everybody.
Epstein shows up at Dalton in '74 with no degree and a gift for charm. That's all he had. Fast forward 2 years later, and the same kid is now a partner at Bear Stearns. He never passed a basic stockbroker test, all of a sudden trusted with million-dollar portfolios. How do you explain that? It's like Uber hiring a guy who never took a driving test and then handing him the entire fleet of cars. It's crazy.
You have no experience, and you're a teacher at Dalton.
He was able, because of his intelligence, to find work at the Dalton School on the Upper East Side in Manhattan.
Which is like this incredibly elite New York City private school. And then all of a sudden you're at Bear Stearns, and like within 2 years, you've like made partner, and you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and nobody knows where you made your money from. This just doesn't happen.
Where did the money come from?
There's always a question, where did Epstein make all his money? Nobody really knows. All these relationships that he has.
I was asking him about how he made his money, because I knew that he had been a teacher at Dalton School. Somebody's talking to you and you have a meter that is like, this doesn't make any sense.
Jeffrey Epstein was a college dropout from Coney Island, from a working class family of Coney Island.
This is what I see in Epstein for what it's worth. You got basically a smart kid. Doesn't come from any particular background, but what he's good at is that he's good at numbers, and he makes friends with important people. And his career really seems to get going when he figures out new ways to dodge taxes. That's how he meets rich people, because he can come up with different strategies to avoid a tax burden.
Economist Eric Weinstein, he leaves one meeting, convinced Epstein was a construct, not a prodigy.
My take on it instantly was this is not an actual human. Someone has created a fake human being called Jeffrey Epstein.
Which leads to the real question. Who supplied the parts? Hold that thought for a minute. We'll come back to it once we see the bigger picture, and there is a bigger picture. Epstein never sold business plans, he sold status. You pack a dinner table with Nobel Prize brains, you sprinkle in a former president, and all of a sudden every billionaire in the room, they want your phone number.
Going to the dinner parties where you would meet academics, politicians, people from the United Nations. I mean, it was a cosmopolitan group of US eminence.
You know, I had dinners with him.
You cannot be a blackmail artist if people know that you're a blackmail artist.
He clearly understood social engineering. He understood that rich people, they can get anything they want, except the one thing they can't easily control is their reputation.
One such guest bought into it completely. Les Wexner, the retail titan behind Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, big guy. Epstein sold himself as a money whisperer, and Wexner, he signed power of attorney paperwork, handing Epstein's legal control of all of his assets. Figure that out. Wexner's checkbook opened doors, a $40 million Manhattan mansion, Gulfstreams on standby, and most importantly, it brought him credibility. When a Fortune 500 owner vouches for you, doors don't just open, they stay open. But why would Wexner, a guy famous for basically micromanaging panty colors, hand the castle keys to a newcomer like Epstein? Journalist Nick Bryant, somebody I interviewed, he dug up one answer: blackmail.
Les Wexner was definitely being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. And Les Wexner is a billionaire, and actually in 1987, he gave Epstein the keys to his kingdom, power of attorney over his billions. Wexner was heavily hooked up to the Genovese crime family. A guy named Frank Walsh, who had a trucking company, did a lot of the hauling for Wexner's various clothing lines, and he was definitely a Genovese guy. Jeffrey Epstein by himself couldn't blackmail someone like Les Wexner, who has connections to the Genovese crime family. Whoever the blackmail mark has to know, if you touch Jeffrey Epstein, there's going to be retribution. That's the only way that Jeffrey Epstein could blackmail some of the most powerful people not only in the country, but in the world.
Private investigators allege that Epstein filmed an affair between Wexner and a model, and then he leveraged it for lifelong control over Wexner. Wexner denies it, but the documents, they show he never ever took the power of attorney back from Epstein. The bottom line, Epstein wasn't pushing spreadsheets, he was trading access. Anyone who accepted the invitation, he gained prestige for a night, and he became leverage for a lifetime.
Rich people can get sex, but they can't necessarily get people to shut up afterwards.
Epstein is just kind of a greedy pervert. But through his greedy perversion, he's now collecting information that could be useful. Who could that be useful to? Who would like dirt?
I did see creepiness immediately.
The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. You're meeting somebody who is unholy.
He knew how to read people and get what he needed from them.
He was a brilliant manipulator, not just of vulnerable girls and women. He was a brilliant manipulator of powerful men.
Now, with cash and credibility secured, Epstein scales up. The next move, it isn't Wall Street, it's Palm Beach.
First of all, they trusted him with their money, which may or may not have been a good idea. And then they began to trust him with other confidence. And then he begins to supply them with things.
Money and reputation, they bought the half, but now the pipeline needed a product. A teen got $200 for the massage and another $200 for each new girl that she would bring in.
I knew that I was coming here to give a guy a massage and to make $200. It was never told to me that I would be molested by this man or anything like that.
By the end, dozens of kids were recruiting each other. Epstein never had to leave the house. Disgusting.
Definitely targeted, children like myself that were vulnerable to him and his money. We felt like we were being helped and saved by him when ultimately he was just preying on us.
Little St. James, it looked like a resort brochure. You had turquoise water, a blue-striped temple, staff in pressed polos, but inside renovation crews, they described the mechanical rooms with electronic locks and hidden cameras that were aimed at every single bed.
Because he had a camera hidden in the room, and he has all kinds of videos, supposedly, of those events.
Why do you think so many smart, powerful people allowed him to get so close?
He was a good salesman. He had some nice assets that he'd throw around, like islands.
A lot of very wealthy people don't own an island. Islands are really tough to maintain. Every rich person starts to wonder, can I afford an island? Or how many jets? If you look at Jeffrey Epstein's wealth, it was like gold beaten into gold foil so that it could cover a vast area and leave the impression of a solid gold life.
I never went to his island, fortunately, but a lot of people did.
Pilots recalled teenage passengers with no parents, no luggage, only fear on board.
He owns a private island over a mile away from St. Thomas, the main island, and it's isolated. He purchases that. He owns the jet that flew in to the airport, and he owns the helicopter and the boats that transported him and the women and children over to the island.
U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General Denise George, she put it bluntly, Epstein owned the whole supply chain, jet, helicopter, launch boat. Once you're on that island, there's no taxi to wave down. Multiple survivors like Virginia Jefferey and Sarah Ransom, they testified about what they saw.
I was abused by people that I can't even mention here. There's a lot of scars hidden behind those walls.
It's no secret that everything was recorded. I've also seen recordings in his office. There are videos that exist. The people that know they exist, I'm sure, are very frightened of them being released.
And remember Ghislaine Maxwell? How could we forget? She was the socialite turned enforcer. Court testimony shows that she handled all the logistics, recruitment, room assignments, school uniform costumes, passport confiscations, and in 2022, she gets 20 years for trafficking. But remember, not one client, not one, joins the defendant's bench.
Why has Maxwell been indicted on a conspiracy and no one else has been indicted? And Maxwell helped Epstein traffic scores of underage girls for 25 years. And she was only indicted on one count of child trafficking.
Little St. James, it was a factory. The product was leverage. Hours of video able to bend a prince, a physicist, or a Fortune 100 CEO to whoever owned the hard drives.
You were joining this secret club.
Right.
You got to be made.
Yes.
You're a made man in the mafia.
And you get to do crazy things.
No. It's only if we have compromat on you do you get ahead.
You see it in gangs where you have to prove your loyalty and you have to do something that now they have that control. It's so that when they raise you up the ranks, they have that blackmail on you. And that's what this whole story is about from the beginning.
Now we get to 2006. That should have been really the end for him. Palm Beach police, they deliver a 53-page probable cause dossier to the FBI. Sworn victim interviews, phone logs, even trash can DNA. Instead, what do the feds do? Federal prosecutors under Alex Acosta, they strike a non-prosecution agreement. Who ever heard of that? Epstein pleads to state charges, serves 13 months in a county wing with daily work release. Even a guy for bookmaking gets more time than that. The deal also grants immunity to any potential co-conspirators, whether they were known or unknown. Years later, Acosta tells Trump's vetting team it was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence. We were told to back off.
Alex Acosta, he was the Epstein prosecutor in the initial case where Epstein was, given a wrist slap and let off. And he was asked by the press, well, why didn't you go harder on Epstein? Why did you let him go? He said, I was told to back off Epstein because he belonged to intelligence. The fact is Epstein has been running through these CIA networks for 40 years, but there's also all the international networks. He belonged to intelligence meant just U.S. intelligence, although there absolutely was U.S. intelligence, but there could also be a role of Israeli intelligence. There could be a role of UK, British intelligence. There could be a role of Saudi intelligence because he was working with Adnan Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia, appeared to have deep ties to the royal family in the UK, and of course appears to have links to many aspects of Israeli intelligence.
In 2002, Vanity Fair writer Vicky Ward, she turned in a profile naming whistleblowers Maria and Annie Farmer. Editor Graydon Carter removed the allegations after a private meeting with Epstein. Why? What happened in that meeting? Security staff, they told NPR and New York Magazine that a severed cat's head and a bullet were later found at Carter's home. Where's the Godfather? Don Corleone, a severed cat's head, not a horse head, but a cat's head. Do you believe this? Yet Carter still denies intimidation, not intimidated by a severed cat's head. Internal compliance memos, they show that Deutsche Bank classified Epstein as a, quote, high risk in 2015 after spotting millions routed through offshore entities. Regulars say the bank kept the account open until mid-2018, closing it only after the Miami Herald expose. When local police, a national newspaper, and a global bank all hit the same tripwire, and each time somebody cuts the fuse, that isn't luck. Something's going on. It's infrastructure. Somebody kept moving the safety net to wherever Jeffrey Epstein fell.
When that happens over and over again, you have to raise the question, is somebody running interference for this person?
The question isn't about the sex with the underage women. The question is really about why was he so protected?
A lot of these girls, and I've talked to a number of them, a lot of them are afraid of, we're not just talking Jeffrey Epstein, we're talking some of the most powerful people in the world. Jeffrey Epstein trafficked underage girls for 25 years.
You don't get this kind of protection out of nowhere. Something is going on.
He was either running his own blackmail business or someone was using him as a front for that. I mean, I think we're kidding ourselves if we try to pretend that's not what was going on.
I know the power that the Department of Justice and the FBI has. When they wanted to eliminate organized crime in this country, they came after us with a vengeance. With a vengeance, believe me. They're very capable, they have the resources, they have the money, they have the strength behind them, and they turn a blind eye to human trafficking.
If you were gonna use an intelligence asset to do something evil, to do something where you can get dirt on people or compromise people or accomplish an objective, you would get someone who's already up.
Oh, 100%.
And then you get that fucked up person and you help them, run this cult, or you help them get girls.
But you intentionally keep them separate. You're not hiring them. They don't work for you.
Right.
They're a private entity. It's like layers of obfuscation.
Like if he wasn't personally a pervert, it wouldn't work.
Oh, not a chance. No.
Like think about, the guy gets arrested for having sex with underage girls or getting them to do happy endings or wherever he did. So he gets arrested. The real weird thing is that he just gets out and gets house arrest.
Yep.
And he gets a little slap on the wrist, and then he's back in action with all these rich people again. Really rich, influential people. Like Bill Gates is hanging out with him after he's already been arrested and convicted.
If you're an entity that wanted full control, you wanted to control the votes of a senator, of a congressman, of a judge, or you wanted to control the money of a billionaire, or you wanted to control some royalty, if you wanted that level of control, you get them on film with a 12-year-old, you control them forever.
August 10, 2019, 6:30 a.m. Manhattan's Metropolitan Correction Center, a place I'm very familiar with, by the way, spent 7 months there. Jeffrey Epstein is found unresponsive in his cell. He'd been on suicide watch for 6 days after an earlier incident that he had. Then, against Bureau of Prisons policy, he was transferred to a lower security special housing unit and left with a bunk bed sheet. Cameras, 2 corridor cameras outside the cell, all of a sudden malfunctioned at the same time. And prosecutors later told the court the footage was unusable. Why? Since when? Where were the guards? Well, both night officers admitted that they were shopping online and dozing off.
Both security cameras glitch out. Both security guards fall asleep. The visitor log page is ripped out of the notebook.
They falsified 75 rounds in the logbook, a felony count they pled guilty to in 2021. The autopsy? New York City's chief medical examiner ruled it was a suicide by hanging. However, Dr. Michael Baden, a former New York State pathologist that I have a lot of respect for, by the way, he was present throughout the family's autopsy. He testified the hyoid bone and the thyroid cartilage, they showed multiple fractures that are more consistent with homicidal strangulation than a self-inflicted hanging. Believe me, he did not commit suicide. I was in that cell. It was all, you'd have to be a midget. There's no place to hang yourself on. Trust me when I tell you this. I'm not saying this for any other reason other than it's the truth. I experienced it. I was there. The cameras go dead. The guards are dozing off. It's nonsense. You couldn't even go to sit on the toilet there without them walking back and forth. Trust me on that. Public reaction? Same as mine. Hashtag Epstein didn't kill himself dominated social media for months. It eclipsed every other thread in the story.
Cameras didn't work, and then the tapes were accidentally deleted from the first time he attempted suicide.
I don't think there's any way in hell he killed himself.
It was definitely a murder.
We've been fuming on this conspiracy for so long.
We've got footage and you're getting it. Then you can make up your own mind.
Killed himself, not killed himself. Was there a guard there? What was going on? Did he have a roommate? To me, that's all just basically a mirage for the bigger problem that's going on.
I've tried not to focus on whether or not Epstein killed himself. I think that's kind of a red herring. What we need to focus on is justice for these victims.
And here's the media trip. Argue suicide versus murder long enough and nobody starts to ask who lost access to the tapes.
Tens of thousands of hours of Epstein and his people having sex with underage children. Where are I want arrests. I want those people. Kill himself, that's okay. We're not stupid. We know what happened. If they say he killed himself, whatever. Maybe they gave him an ultimatum, Adam. Maybe they're like, hey, listen, we're going to shut the cameras off. You at least better do it or else it's going to be hell or high water for you. So maybe, I don't know. I don't care at this point. I want the customers.
Where are the tapes? Why is everyone talking about the flight logs and the files? Where are the tapes? This guy was clearly taping people to blackmail them.
The FBI agents, they removed dozens of CDs and hard drives from Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. 3 weeks earlier, each labeled with a name and a date.
The FBI drilled Epstein's safe after he was arrested, and they took out anywhere from hundreds to thousands of DVDs.
And we know they did that, and yet no one is asking for the tapes.
Defense lawyers in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, they confirmed none of that video entered into evidence. Why not? Why not? My friends, that's textbook misdirection. You focus the country on a bedsheet knot so no one else asks who controls the compromise. Until the perpetrators on those drives are brought to justice, suicide versus murder is a side quest. The main plot is who just lost and who now controls the leverage of a lifetime. So, we circle back to Eric Weinstein's hunch that Epstein felt like a construct, but who was the engineer? Okay, Epstein the operator is mapped. Now the bigger mystery, who built the machine he ran?
Take half of all the time you spend thinking about Jeffrey Epstein, talking about Jeffrey Epstein, everybody, and spend half of that time saying, what do we think about whoever was behind Jeffrey Epstein?
There are two plausible theories that I believe, both sketched by career intelligence officers who know what they're talking about. Theory number one, it was a state-run access operation. Seasoned intel people point out the whole operation feels like classic access work. You can't recruit a president or a prince, so you recruit the guy who parties with them, Epstein. Mossad shows up in various rumors and speculations because Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, he died while under investigation as a longtime Israeli asset. And contractors who installed Epstein's townhouse cameras, they told reporters they were, quote, from an Israeli security agency. But CIA and MI6 veterans, they also say the tradecraft looks familiar to every major service. One ex-agency analyst put it to me like this: if a foreign shop is collecting blackmail on U.S. leaders, Langley's first instinct isn't outrage, it's do we already have a copy? In other words, more than one flag could have been on the play.
If someone wasn't exploiting what he had available to them, somewhere there were any number of people who weren't doing their job. And I've seen this and that administration come and go, and this particular Senate committee come and go. All these people are temporary. The agency is eternal. They have the same kind of incentive that everything else does, which is to survive and grow. And any kind of information, any sort of fuel that will allow them to do that is necessary.
My suspicion is that there was probably American intelligence agencies that were aware a plot was being planned. Did they purposely let it happen so that this could, or were they pushed to let it happen? Or did they not take it seriously and then it happened and then everyone at that agency that's in a position of power is going, oh, this is my fault. I let this, okay, we got to find a way to make it seem like this is not on. My suspicion is that is most conspiracy stuff, where it's like there's some incompetence and then someone trying to cover up incompetence, and that leads to this insane conspiracy because this person's trying to protect a lie.
Theory number two, free agent blackmail merchant. Picture Epstein as a data broker in human vice. Royal video goes to one buyer, Silicon Valley footage goes to another. Political leverage, it's sold by the terabyte. One former NSA agent told Vanity Fair Epstein didn't care who the customer was, as long as they wrote the check. governments, hedge funds, opposition researchers, you name it. He didn't need a single puppeteer when the market itself kept him in business. That's the bottom line. And here's what we can actually see in the paper trail. No theories, just receipts. First, the flight logs. 30 plus same-day international trips where Epstein's jet, it touched down in one country at breakfast and another by dinner. Russia in the morning, Israel that night. Wheels up again before sunrise. Anyone who's ever waited in a customs line, you know you don't move that fast unless somebody's waving you through. I know that for a fact. I'm always in customs lines. Over in New Mexico, county permits list a helipad engineered to Pentagon specs. Why is that? That's massive overkill for a private chopper, but it's perfect if you want aircraft coming and going without ever hitting a public runway. Trial exhibits add another clue. Guest list. At least 6 researchers who held live Pentagon or DARPA grants show up as visitors to Little St. James. Epstein, he wasn't just quoting playboys. He was collecting scientists working on government projects. Even the banks noticed the pattern. Compliance teams at J.P. Morgan and later Deutsche Bank, they flagged his offshore wires for review years before he was arrested. The alerts went upstairs and the account stayed open anyway. Put it together in a picture forms. It doesn't prove Mossad or CIA or some Bond villain startup, but it does tell us Epstein moved through airports, laboratories, and bank lobbies like a man who never expected to hear the word no. Somebody kept the lane clear.
Rather than trying to figure out what's true and what's false, just consider that there are a range of possibilities. That's what exists. And then try to calculate which of those range of possibilities seems more likely.
Can someone give us a definitive answer so that we can stop asking the question?
The Epstein case is very, very, very recent, and the people involved are all alive and well, and many of them in very powerful positions in the U.S. government and internationally.
There's a major yearning right now to get to the end of the movie where we find out everything that happened, you know? And I think it's great that people have that desire, and I hope more and more does come out. I think the truth is that with any intelligence operations, we're probably never gonna know all of the details of exactly what happened.
Look, Epstein's gone, but the hard drives the feds pulled from the townhouse, they're not gone. Whoever sits on that archive can still tug a senator's vote. It can nudge a tech billionaire's merger, maybe whisper in a judge's ear, who knows? Until those tapes surface, every powerful name on the Epstein list, and there is a list, is just one phone call away from cooperating. So no, we don't finish with a tidy answer. We finish with a to-do list. Follow the postmortem money, his estate, the trust, the odd wire transfers that kept surfacing, each one is a breadcrumb. Unseal the drives. Congress actually has the power to demand them. Why are they not demanding them? Public pressure, that's the fuel to make them try. We got to keep the pressure on. And watch the pattern. When you spot another overnight success, mysterious wealth, instant VIP access, legal problems that just melt away, ring the alarm, my friends, before they start wiring chandeliers with cameras, because the next Epstein, he's already auditioning, unless we find out who held the door open the first time. That's the end of this story. It's not the end of Epstein's story. Trust me on that. We have so many unanswered questions. There is a client list. There is a flight log, no doubt about it. There's so many unanswered questions here. And why do we need these questions answered? Because nobody, I don't care how much money you have, I don't care how much power you have, I don't care what elite group you belong to, nobody has the right to abuse young women. Young girls, nobody. And that's what we need to find out. These people need to be held accountable. It has to stop, because if we don't put a stop to it, it's going to continue to go on. Young girls being trafficked and abused. And these men, women, whoever they might be, need to be held accountable. That's why the Epstein story should not die. We deserve full disclosure on this. And I really hope this administration, they need to come to their senses and give it to us. It's important. We cannot let this go away, my friends. That's my ending to my story with it. Hopefully it's not the ending to Epstein's story. Take care.